Welcome to Perspectives on Neurodiversity, a podcast dedicated to challenging myths and assumptions about neurodiverse life. I am your host, Christopher Scott Wyatt, speaking as the autistic me. On this episode, we'll be discussing autism from the perspective of a sibling with my guest, Josh Stehle. You can find Josh at Josh Stehle, STEHLE.com.
Josh-Stehle, yeah.
Which will have some information about Josh, his brother Zach, and their work together. Josh's older brother, Zach, is an autistic adult with a passion for superheroes. Josh has written about their relationship in his recently published book, I Am a Superhero Expert, Growing Up with My Autistic Brother. Josh also has a twin sister, Becca. Josh and Zach collaborate as the Stehle Bros on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Josh, it is a pleasure to welcome you to Perspectives on Neurodiversity.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. What an introduction. Thank you so much.
I will ask right off the bat, you are a college student or recently graduated?
I am a college student. I'm a junior at Westchester University. I recently just transferred here, going for my marketing degree, and this is what I do professionally. But I am a college student. I'm 21 years old.
And I taught in Pennsylvania, except it was the other side of the state, Southwest Pennsylvania. I taught at Slippery Rock University, which is part of the PA system. And you said you are at Westchester.
Yes. I was at Arcadia University for 2 years. I played basketball there up until last year. I was always an advocate, and I've always been, of course, best friends with my brother, Zach. He's my older brother. He is autistic, but that was before I wrote my book. And that was before I started on this process of advocating for special needs individuals. After my sophomore basketball season, that's when things just started to happen and take off. And I've been riding that wave from there, and it's taken me on an unbelievable journey.
It's always nice to have young people picking up this mantle of advocacy, both as allies and autistic self-advocates who are young. And one aspect of your book that was appealing to me is it is from a young person's perspective. You are clearly young enough to be experiencing college. You write a lot about the things you heard and the things you saw at college that sort of nudged you to writing this book in its entirety.
Absolutely.
Could you explain to the audience how, being a student, you started to think about the word autism and what it meant to your classmates and those around you?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think that one thing to make clear with my story specifically, but I can also argue it with many people's stories, is the fact that I am not an expert on autism in the medical sense. I don't know everything there is to know, and that's okay. I am an expert in regards to my brother and what makes him tick, what he needs in his life, how to best support him and hopefully provide him with the best life possible. But when it comes to autism as a whole, it's a spectrum for a reason. Everybody is so unique and so different and amazing in their own way. And that is why it is very, very, it's hard for many people, I think, to wrap their mind around that. That's why I think a lot of subconscious bias exists regarding autism, especially from people that don't fully understand or take the time to understand. And that's where they can hurt people, even when they don't fully understand. So I went to college, and before then, I grew up in a house of autism advocates. My family's very close. And going to college was the first point of my life. And I'm not saying this was everybody, but you go out and you experience the world, and you see how this subconscious bias exists in our community. And it isn't everybody, and it isn't all the time, but it is there. People who perhaps say things about our community, people that will say or do things that are hurtful, and we can get into specifics what that may or may not be. But a lot of times these people who are friends of mine, people who would never intentionally hurt somebody else, they don't even understand the impact that their words or actions could have on our community, our autism community. It was this realization that really prompted me and inspired me to write the book, to be more vocal about being an autism advocate, and to expand my message to more than just my brother Zach. Zach is brilliant. He really is amazing, and I've seen firsthand not only how brilliant he is, but how people limit him because he's autistic without fully getting to know him. And I can only imagine how that happens with so many other people.
And let's talk a little bit about the listening process that you engaged in to write this book. You took some notebooks, you asked, what is autism? And you just walked around, met people, scheduled some meetings, and took notes on what the people around you perceived as autism.
Yeah.
When I talk to students, when I talk to clients, I talk about active listening. We do focus groups, we do surveys. That's what we do in communications fields. We study how people hear what the message is. So you started some ethnographic research. You started logging what people said about autism.
Yeah.
Can you describe that process for the audience before we really address your relationship with your brother? What did you find out from other people first?
It was quite eye-opening. This was at Arcadia University. It was an informal scientific study that I conducted from about September of 2021 to the end of the year, about maybe before then, about March. It all began because the second or third day of school, I remember sitting with some new acquaintances I had made that year, and a new friend that I had made said the word retard. And he also, at that time, said that that a basketball player ran like a kid with autism. And he said these comments without any hurtful intent, but he still said them. And they are words of hurtful intent, whether he said them with that intent or not. I heard him say that, and I started to listen. I started to go to my classes and open my ears. And it isn't, of course, once again, I want to stress it isn't everybody, and it isn't all the time, but there are some biases and some common phrases and some words such as the R word, words like the word retard, with some very, very, very negative and hurtful connotation towards the autism and special needs, not just autism, special needs communities, that people use it commonplace, a very, very common language, and they don't realize the impact that it has. People say things and do things, and many times I truly don't believe that many of these people really, really mean what they say or understand the impact of their words. When I started to realize this, I went to Target and I bought one of those really big fat notebooks and some of those fancy gel pens. I thought that would make my scientific research feel, smarter and more scientific for whatever reason that I guess it did. I took it seriously, and I walked around, and at the time I played college basketball. So Arcadia was a small school. It was only about 2,000 to 3,000 students. So I knew most of the students, and a couple of months in, many people knew that I was doing this. And I would ask people, what is autism? Tell me about autism. I wanted to not only get their view and hear what they had to say, but I wanted to create dialogue. I wanted to talk about it and discuss it and hear from them, hear their view of it. And I wanted to talk to everyone, faculty, students, from all walks of life. Sometimes it would be, I would tell them beforehand. Sometimes I would find them just walking around and say, hey, do you want to do an interview with me right now? Okay, would you do an interview with me? Sometimes they wouldn't even know what they were being interviewed about. And by the end of the study, it culminated into almost 100 responses. I really learned a lot. I did. It was interesting.
when you sit there doing this, you're obviously doing this unscientifically in a notebook, and you're leafing through these pages. You're from the Philadelphia area.
Correct. Yeah.
These are college educated individuals. These are college faculty members, staff, people we would assume understand autism.
Yes.
That is just a general assumption is people understand. What did you find that they didn't understand after you had written down their comments?
What was so interesting was that what people didn't understand varied so wildly. What I first found out was how much I didn't understand. I learned so much. Of course, I knew so many things about my brother, but what I fully realized in that process was how different and unique my brother was to perhaps anybody else who may be autistic. The sense that autism is a spectrum and everyone can be placed on this plot on the spectrum. And sure, there are patterns that exist, but that doesn't mean that the severity of autism patterns is always the same, or perhaps someone may have different characteristics and somebody else may not have those characteristics at all. I didn't fully understand that or understand the extent of that until I did this interview and that process. And that was really eye-opening to me. What I really found out about other people during this scientific research, I keep saying scientific, it was as scientific as some kid playing basketball could muster. What was interesting was it turned out that many people who had a lot of experience working with special needs individuals, or perhaps were in special ed related fields of study, or perhaps had an autistic or special needs person in their life, they not only knew a lot more about it, but they were much more willing to talk about it and discuss and learn. What was perhaps a little saddening was there was a trend that people who didn't really know too much about it, that was often the way they wanted it to be. They didn't really feel like they wanted to know. So when I went and I wrote my book, those were the people that I wanted to address, and I didn't want to accuse. I really don't believe in accusing. What I wanted to do was I wanted to create a book that would be positive and uplifting and fun. The type of book that you want to read, hopefully, that you'd want to read cover to cover, and you're excited to open up. And shameless plug for the book there, but
your brother Zach, he is your older brother, and how much older is he?
He's 2 years older. 1 year and 10 months.
Not quite 2 years older.
Not quite 2 years older. I found it out there.
And you also have a twin sister.
I do have a twin sister. She's amazing. She is actually a director at JMU. So she is a junior down at James Madison University, and she directs shows and theater. She's really cool.
Your family obviously is very close. And one of the things that stands out is that Zach actually did write a thank you in the book. For those who wonder, we often say nothing about us without us. Zach was involved in this book.
Yeah.
He talked to you as you wrote it, and that's very clear. So I Am a Superhero Expert is really a collaborative effort with Zach, not just you.
Absolutely. So yeah, Zach was not only he was his own editor. He was my first and last editor throughout the process, but he did contribute a piece of his own. And the book primarily is built upon anecdotes, and you can't tell false anecdotes. They're all true stories, and the only way to tell true stories is to collaborate with the person that they're about. I spent a long time with Zach eating burgers and discussing the stories we want to tell in our book. He was with the development of I Am a Superhero Expert every step of the way, and it's a special product for both of us. We're both really happy with how it came out.
Some self-advocates resist the autism is my superpower claim. It's a meme that goes around, a saying that goes around. This isn't about autism as a superpower. Your brother has a unique affinity. There is no other way to describe his passion. He has created a superhero universe, which you give a glimpse into in the book. He knows everything, apparently, that anyone would want to know about the Marvel universe, the DC universe. He is quite literally a superhero expert.
That's right. So when I speak about superheroes in the book, most of the anecdotes are about superheroes. Well, very many of them, because that's Zach's great passion. The whole talk about superheroes is very literal. Zach is a superhero expert of the highest caliber. Our TikTok platform is actually built on Zach's insane comic book mastery. People on the internet and on TikTok especially submit in comments just insane trivia questions and attempt to stump him with just these remarkably specific questions, but very rarely are they able to do so. It's pretty insane. And that's his thing. He knows it. He has an incredible memory when it comes to remembering names and storylines and the way that these plots and characters and backstories all fit together. That's his thing. He is quite literally a superhero expert.
This isn't a savant skill. This isn't a photographic memory. This is a true immersion in the books, in the material. He reads them again and again. He watches the films. He consumes. So this is not just he read it once and it's a photographic memory. He reads these. He will read the same books over and over again, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he doesn't go a day without reading his favorites, or all of them. Just to describe Zach a little bit, he's my older brother. He's always got that goofy grin on his face. He's got glasses and short brown hair and his favorite comic book T-shirt on. When he isn't working at Giant, where he's a cashier, he loves to sit in his room with his pet cat named Piper, and those two are best friends. And what he does is he sits and he reads his comic books. He has stacks and stacks in boxes, and they surround his room and his bookshelves and his bed. He never goes a day without reading all of his favorites, like I said, and that's his thing. His other great passion is his own superhero world that he has created, inspired by his favorite Marvel and DC and comic books. He specializes in Marvel and DC for the other comic book experts and interested listening. He has created his own unique world that it consists of hundreds, if not thousands, of his own characters and plots and worlds, and he also writes all those down, and that's his passion. That's his thing.
You are an athlete. You are a college basketball player, and you obviously are very social. You're outgoing. You're speaking. So how did your friendship become so close with your older brother?
Brotherhood is unbreakable. I think that part of it is sometimes you click with somebody, right? Whether there's a reason that you're friends with somebody, you're best friends with somebody, and you perhaps are lifelong partners with somebody special throughout your life, perhaps. Zach is my lifelong everything. We click. He is not only my brother, but my best friend. He is my everything. We have some similar interests, as he's trying so hard to bring me into comic books and superheroes, and I'm learning a lot throughout the 21 years of my life that he has attempted to teach me. And he has, you learn a lot by association. And he in turn sacrifices so much. Zach does struggle with some social interaction at times. It's something that he's working on, but it is something that he does struggle with, and that's okay. But he really, really, really also puts in a concerted effort to show interest in my hobbies and basketball and that sort of thing. And now that we've been able to create our the Steele Bros videos and our social media brand together. Zach and I also go on some TV shows occasionally together, and we speak at schools occasionally together, and ultimately it's Zach's message, it's Zach's. It's really I live by Zach's words, and I want to be like Zach, be the embodiment of what he stands for. That is how we are so close, I'd say.
One of the dynamics that comes through in the book is that you are protective of Zach.
Yes.
You have noticed when coworkers, managers, customers, just people in general have not treated him with respect and dignity.
Right.
A lot of empathy comes through in the book where the actions of others have offended you, and you in some ways take on the role of what might be called the big brother, and you defend Zach from coworkers and managers and people, customers. Can you speak about that dynamic where you've sometimes flipped the traditional roles and you're the protective one?
Zach has and always will have big brother privileges, and I can never argue that. Zach has big brother privileges. Not feel the need, but feel the responsibility to protect my brother. A lot of that stems from the fact that Zach will always, always, always look for the positives in everybody and in every situation. No matter what, no matter who he is with, no matter what is said to him, he is in fact even perhaps blind to almost blind to criticism, blind to indecency, blind to people who are trying to be mean to him. He doesn't see that. There was an instance a few years ago, perhaps a little longer than that, where there was a person in Zach's life, not a major person, but who borrowed money from Zach, a pretty large sum of money, and who did it very obviously, very obviously was just trying to take money from Zach, because that person knew that Zach would never ask for the money back, and they took a lot of money. And when Zach eventually, through telling us what had happened, us being myself and my parents, and we encouraged Zach to go and request the money back, as it was, hey, can I borrow some money? Zach was never able to get the money back. These are the sort of like gray area decisions that you can't really always prepare my brother for, along with many autistic individuals, or just many people in general growing up, And that's the sort of thing where it's like, for Zach, sometimes I have to worry that Zach will never see that coming, because he will never, ever see ill intent in somebody. He's always looking at the positives, and he is always being positive. He always wants to give money to every sort of charity and any tip that he can give. And despite the fact that perhaps the charity isn't as great and well-intentioned as it may seem, Zach will not care. Zach will want to give that money, and Zach will want to help any way he can. And Zach will want to stay late and do every possible overtime shift at work that he possibly can. And that is who Zach is. He is the most selfless, the kindest individual. And it's amazing. If I had to say that Zach has a superpower, in fact, I do say in the book, Zach has a superpower. It isn't the superhero, the comic book knowledge. It isn't any of the savant-like skill. I wouldn't call Zach a savant, but Zach has these extremely incredible skills. But I wouldn't call those his superpower. I would call his superpower the fact that he goes out and he makes the world a better place with kindness. And I think, making the world a better place, that's exactly what superheroes do. The whole naming, I'm a superhero expert. Well, I'm a superhero expert. I've grown up my entire life learning and watching, growing from my brother, who is in that sense a superhero. And that's why I call myself a superhero expert. That's why I'm protective, because the world isn't always fair. The world is this big gray area decision. It will hurt you. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. And I want Zach to have the best life he possibly can. Zach wants everybody to have the best life they possibly can. And that's why I'm protective. But Zach will always at the same time have big brother privileges. And he will be able to tell me what to do. And I will have to do them many times because he's the older brother.
You write about the education system, and you have the insights because you were in AP classes. In fact, you thank one of your AP instructors in the book.
Right.
Meanwhile, your brother struggled in traditional schools. They didn't meet his needs. He transferred. He ended up in a cyber school. For those unfamiliar, pre-COVID, there were online schools. In fact, Pennsylvania, they do have a number of cyber schools, cyber academies. It's actually not uncommon. Of course, COVID changed that as well. We do want to acknowledge that COVID put everyone online for a while. But Zach did have to migrate out of the traditional school that was meeting your needs but couldn't meet his. Could you discuss how your family was shaped by that? Also, I believe it's right that your mother was an educator.
My mother was a teacher, an elementary school teacher for many years. I think that around the time, now I'm going to speak through the research that I've done and through the eyes of my mother, who is an advocate in her own right. And I'm doing this because when Zach was in elementary school, I was in kindergarten and then also in elementary school. So probably around that time, the most important thing I was thinking about was the lollipop I got from the nurse's office. I know that Zach did face some challenges with public education. He was not a problem child by any means. He just had some difficulty with some of the traditional styles of teaching. He had difficulty learning. I like to use this example a lot. Growing up, especially in kindergarten, Zach was really, he couldn't, he still, I don't know if he could say them. He couldn't say the ABCs, couldn't say them, couldn't spell them. But at the same time, he was reading full Harry Potter novels, full Star Wars novels. And he was understanding. Well, actually, teachers and even neuropsychologists at the time were confused. Some even said that, some accused him of only just, staring at the pages, not really understanding, comprehending what was in the book. But when they had asked Zach, what are you reading? Zach always knew. Zach was enjoying. Zach was loving the book. So what was happening? Well, Zach's style of learning was he literally taught himself how to read at such a young age. And he didn't learn how to read by learning what all the letters were and then putting them into words and then putting those words into sentences and so forth. He instead memorized what each of those words looked like and what they meant, like it was a symbol. Back to his insane memorization, his memory skills. And that's how he taught himself how to read. So if he learned what a word was and what it meant, he never forgot it. And that's, he was incredible at reading in that sense. But many times in those public schooling systems, how they taught you how to read was like a spelling test in which he's given a word in isolation. Many times, if he's just hearing it for the first time, he'll have no idea how to spell it or perhaps even how to say it. And he's labeled as a below average or a very, very well below average reader and writer. And that's just not where the placement was. I believe that public schools were very rigid, especially in his time. Now that this was 15 years ago, because he wasn't a problem, he would sit when he faced challenges, many times he would retreat to his books, his comfort. And there were just some challenges with that structure of teaching. It worked for many kids, but it didn't work for everybody. So after bouncing around a little bit, what did end up working was to go to PALCS, PALCS. It was an online platform before COVID. I know that's crazy, which was a very, very good and successful, well-run school that was online. And my mother, who was a former instructor and who knew Zach better than anybody, was his primary instructor. Now, this wasn't homeschooling. He had online instructors, real teachers for all of his subjects. So my mom wasn't teaching him. My mom was just helping him to learn in the way he learned. And by the end, he had one of the highest GPAs in the school. So it wasn't that he wasn't capable. It's just that he needed to learn in the environment that suited his needs.
So while you were in public high school as a freshman or sophomore, he was online finishing high school digitally with your mother as his instructional aid and support.
Yes.
So you were thriving, and I assume your sister also then was in public school.
Yeah.
But we failed your brother. As a public school system, as educators, counting myself, we often fail those who are outside the norms.
Failure means you gave up. Failure means that Zach didn't succeed and then we didn't do anything about it. You didn't, or we as educators, and educators doesn't always have to be those teachers. Educators can be all of us who are speaking, and all of us educators can be as simple as the person who knows a thing or two, who wants to make even the smallest change to the world around them. The educators can be the person who reposts a story on their Instagram with some information about autism, how it affects people. We're all educators. And as educators, we only fail if we give up. So I don't think we failed. I think that it's a learning process, that we've actually really grown and gotten better over the last years. But we still do have a long way to go as a community, and not only as in the autism community and the special needs community, but as a teaching community.
I like that approach, because I, as a parent, though, I often, my children are currently at home. We switched to homeschooling after some challenges where the schools just bluntly said, we can't meet the needs of one of your children. It is disheartening that when there are additional demands, that too often the response is, okay, you, the parent, need to go deal with this because we, the K-12 system, can't address these needs. But you're right. Everyone is an educator. Obviously, we're homeschooling our two girls right now. It's just, I am deeply saddened, though, that your brother wasn't able to find a place to thrive at first, but it had to be a process where your parents had to be the advocates, and your parents had to make sure that his needs were met. And a lot of families don't have that ability. They don't have those parents who can make those connections and become those advocates against a school system to nudge it in the right direction.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but I'm privileged as a educator that I can help my daughters through this bumpy time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe that is why everyone can, big or small, can contribute. And by big or small, I mean it can be as simple as, like I said, I like to say a repost on a story on Instagram, because at least Gen Zers, my generation, you'll know what I'm talking about. It is the smallest act with perhaps one of the biggest impact that could happen. The spread of information and the spread of a collective, hey, we are here. You're not alone. That was so needed especially when my brother Zach was growing up. I remember talking to my mom about this exact thing. And I remember the thing that she said that really stuck with me was the fact that there was no information, and support groups and podcasts like this one. And it was really hard to really know and understand. And it was difficult to have a grasp of it was a big unknown. When things are unknowns, that's when they're scary. Everything is scary when you don't know what it is. The more information we have as a community, the less scary and the more able to tackle it positively I think it'll become. I think that also brings us back to the subconscious bias that I experienced when I went to school at Arcadia. It was always this subconscious bias, and I think that's just because people didn't know. And if people just knew and experienced just what so many of us have to offer, who are limited so quickly by other people simply because they're on some an autism spectrum, or they have a special needs of any sort, a disability of any sort. If people just knew how much they have to offer and didn't limit so quickly based on first impressions or perhaps no impressions at all, it would be very, very powerful, a different world.
I thank you for that message. And I want to refer again to joshstehle.com.
Josh-Stehle recently updated the website, the brand new Josh-Stehle.
So josh-stehle.com.
Yes, the new and improved.
So listeners can find more about I Am a Superhero Expert, growing up with my autistic brother. They can also find links to your TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook feeds. So how does a social media platform work as the Stehle Bros?
Yeah, so our big platform is on TikTok. It is the STEHLE.BROS, the Stehle Bros. We are closing in on 100,000 followers. We're getting there, we're very excited. That's our big platform. We also have the Stehle Bros Instagram account with not that many followers, not 100,000, but it's building, it's growing steadily, where we post extra content not seen on TikTok, some pictures, and a lot of Zach. My personal Instagram is just Josh Stehle, all lowercase, no spaces. You can find that on Instagram as well. We do have a Facebook page, the Stehle Bros Autism Awareness. There you'll see a lot of reposts, a lot of the same content. You can find I Am a Superhero Expert pretty much anywhere books are sold.
You said you're studying marketing. You're taking the show on the road. You've gone with Zach to conferences. You've done some book signings. How has that gone as a team, going to speak to at events and doing the public outreach with Zach?
Right. Yeah, it's really been an amazing experience. When we started all of this, the goal was to get our book out there and to spread our message and to see what happens. But we never expected it to grow to this point. And we're just so thankful from the response from the community, from everybody. We've been fortunate enough and to be able to have the opportunity to speak in high school assemblies and in conferences and all that. And we honestly just cannot thank everybody who has given us a chance enough for the opportunity to spread our message of inclusion and awareness. We really cannot thank everybody enough.
The book itself, as I read that, there were things that I looked at it and said, I recognize my daughter, or I recognize myself. Everything from the following rules to the need for predictable routines, getting taken advantage of. These are all things that I also talk to my daughters about, because they are concerns I have about, for their safety and well-being, as well as my own past experiences. The book, because it's from that perspective of anecdotes written with your brother, through your brother, they are very emblematic of what a lot of us experience and what our children will experience, what our friends and family with autism experience. As an autistic self-advocate, it's difficult to go out there and sometimes say, you see me speaking to you, you don't understand that I'm using the GPS to get here. I struggle to, if the little thing on the GPS says I'm speeding, I slow down, right? I got to follow the map just right. Without the GPS, there's no chance of me getting there. There's all these things that are autistic traits. And as you said, it's a spectrum where I might see my daughter more affected in one way and myself in another. This book is really good about placing that in perspective. We are just who we are. There isn't one autistic template that everyone's going to fit. Zach is Zach.
Yeah.
And that's really, really well dealt with in the book. It's a quick read. I would say that most people could probably read it in a weekend if you have set aside some time.
Yeah.
I think the funniest thing was after I started to skim a chapter, I reached the next page and it said, you probably skimmed the last chapter. I hope readers experience that. You caught the reader right there and confronted them with what they had done.
Well, I did it too. It was a copy and pasted list of one of Zach's very, very large superhero teams. I'll leave that for you listeners to experience yourselves. But if you guys do end up skipping over the majority of the 118 characters on that list, do not fret. It is okay. In my first round of edits, and I sent it to my publisher, and I got it back with a whole just red lines everywhere with spelling errors. I was like, oh no. And because I didn't even read it over, and I forgot that when it comes to spelling, Zach has all these ideas, but when he writes 118 characters, he sometimes gets sloppy with the actual spelling. Because he's writing so much. I'm sure many writers can relate to that when you get into that free form and you just want to get all your ideas down. That was added in there. Even I skimmed over it, so it's okay.
Josh, it's been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you taking this time with us. Again, it's josh-stehle.com.
Yes.
And I will include links to your social media in the podcast notes and on the blog when we do the transcription. That is, I am a superhero expert growing up with my autistic brother. We've been speaking to Josh Stehle on Perspectives on Neurodiversity. Josh, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.